Today, we talk about the Momo Challenge.
Tasty!
So welcome to the Valley Soup. This is a little bit of a special edition with your local tech director, Joshua Wakefield, instead of the voice of the Valley, J. Max Early. Today we have two very special guests in the stew, so I'm going to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do for Juniata Valley.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Galloway Maslanik. I'm the K-12 school social worker, and we also have my intern with us, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
My name is Emily Ellis, and I am the social work intern from Juniata College.
Awesome. Well, welcome both of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. So the reason that we asked you two to come on is there have been some sort of viral phenomenon going on right now. You really can't get on Facebook for more than a moment without seeing things about the Momo Challenge and what are some of the implications for those sort of things. I think for parents there's a lot of uncertainty. Sometimes there's a little bit of a digital disconnect because we don't always necessarily understand the technology that our kids are using sometimes. So we brought the two of you in to kind of help us with a little bit of like a quasi PSA to sort of help our parents and our community members maybe understand some of these phenomena a little bit better. So with the Momo Challenge, I know a lot of parents are concerned. My kids have obviously heard of it as well, but not a lot of us are aware of necessarily what the challenge even is. So I was hoping maybe you two could comment on what the Momo Challenge is, how is it relevant to us as parents, how is it relevant to our kids?
I think I can answer that one. So for what the Momo Challenge even is, you've probably seen a really scary looking face going around, which is actually taken from a Japanese sculpture. So it's not even a real person's face.
It's like the bird face, right? It's
yeah.
Okay.
But what the challenge is that there is a chatting app called WhatsApp, which people can use to chat with anybody, anywhere, which means they can call, text, anything to anywhere in the world with any number. So what the challenge is there are 3 popular numbers where this random person or your child can text back and forth. I believe the child makes the initial interaction with the number to like quote unquote contact Momo. And there will be a response back that will demand your child to give personal information about your family, about themselves, about their peers, and it could even also provide photos, like give us photos of your family or else, and they will often threaten them by saying if you don't do this then you will have to hurt yourself, or part of the challenge will say like if you don't want us to harm your family you need to hurt yourself, something that's very dangerous for students and children to find because that's terrifying.
I think that even though it can't usually access kids and parents, it's creating an alarm in them because the way that kids view it, it seems real to them. And so then even though it's completely false and no one is literally going to make them provide the information or do the things that they're asking, kids then are afraid or they think somehow that they do have to act on them, and so they need to be educated that these things aren't real on what they're seeing and that they need to report it right away, so that then that way, you know, they're not thinking that they actually have to act on what's being asked of them, whether it's personal information or safety.
Sure. And like I know, I believe I had seen that. I know the origin was with WhatsApp, and then there was also like a YouTube component to this as well, right?
Yes. From what I have seen reported, it was said that in YouTube there is regular YouTube and YouTube Kids, which is all strictly children appropriate content. It was reported that there were these Momo Challenge videos being integrated into child-friendly content, and because posters were using appropriate filters that would allow the video to go through, YouTube posted it and it was allowed to stay up. But as like the more we're learning about this challenge through what YouTube has been reporting directly back to its users, those reports are getting slimmer and slimmer, and there's a possibility that there's only one video that was taken down, and now parents keep spreading it, still afraid, because you do not know really if there's like a clip in there until you get to it, and it's hard to find. So the fear is very valid, but I know that it's being cracked down on.
Yeah. And my understanding too is that basically what happened is when the video was discovered and reported, the biggest parent concern from it was, first of all, it was in the midst of the regular program, and so the kids were coming across it completely unknowingly, and parents weren't necessarily thinking that they needed to supervise that kid-friendly show because it's a kid-friendly show that they're familiar with. And so when it became apparent, then again, it becomes an educational thing where they have to like make sure kids know if this kind of stuff pops up on whatever you're watching or chatting or using, you know, knowing what to do so that they know that they're safe and that can be reported. I think the other concern where Emily said that it's being cracked down on is that initially the perception from the original parents that discovered it was that YouTube didn't act quickly, like they didn't have an actual team for safety response. And so it took them like a week to take the video down. And then in the meantime, how many other kids possibly accessed it. And so that was one of the concerns that was raised when that happened. And so they were advocating for YouTube to have a more active, quick response to the concerns of those videos being present.
Sure. And I know, I mean, it's interesting because it's almost one of those situations like myth versus reality, because from what I've understood and from what you guys have said as well, that it may have only been like one video or a very small handful of videos that, you know, otherwise may have had a really small footprint. We might have only had, you know, 200 or 300 people that may have seen something like that. But then once something goes viral and it blows up, it almost makes what could even be a myth become reality just because so many people are sharing it and kind of exploding that idea. But this isn't the first challenge. So we know that there have been other ones, the Blue Whale Challenge. There was the phenomenon with like Slender Man back, you know, a little bit earlier. So those of us a little bit younger remember Slender Man, I'm sure. So I think it brings up, even if it's not specific to Momo, that's just the hot topic right now, the whole idea of challenges and kind of influencing kids to do things that they may otherwise not do. There was the whole Drake song challenge where they'd like get out of their car and dance and then try to get back in their car quick, and like there were videos of people wrecking into things because they weren't in their car driving at the time, even to like goofy things like the cinnamon challenge. I can remember when I was younger. So you know, are you aware of any other popular challenges other than the ones that I've highlighted? And just, you know, do you have any thoughts about, you know, what are some conversations that parents can have with their kids regarding different challenges that are out there, how to, you know, approach that? I know for myself as a parent, you know, obviously I'm not going to be aware of everything that my kids, I try to moderate the best I can that content, but obviously I'm never going to be able to know everything that my kids access. It's just not possible in today's world.
You can't keep them in a bubble.
No, you can't. So, you know, what are some conversations that we can have with our kids, you know, regarding these challenges?
Well, I'm going to let Emily talk a little bit about any other challenges she knows of compared to what you referenced, because when she and I were talking earlier about doing this, she knew of a few others that I wasn't even familiar with. And then I'll comment on the conversations parents can have with their kids.
So I know, along with this Momo challenge that I use loosely, like the term challenge doesn't even fit this because it's just not correct. Usually internet challenges are meant to be harmless, like the ones that we saw with like the Ice Bucket Challenge that rose money and awareness towards ALS, and then of course the Mannequin Challenge, which is just like a cute little thing. Like mostly challenges are meant to be harmless, but of course there are creators online and so that will just create these trends that their audience will get behind, and some of the ones that are more of a trend right now. I'm sure everybody has heard of the Tide Pod Challenge.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah, where the challenge is to put a Tide Pod in your mouth and see how long you can keep it there, which is incredibly unsafe. But that is a big one that is still occurring right now. And then another one, which is kind of on the same line as the Momo Challenge, is the Bird Box Challenge.
Oh, okay.
Which is basically based on the Netflix film Bird Box that was released in December, where people will put blindfolds on themselves and they will walk around or even sometimes drive around blindfolded to see if they can get through a whole 24 hours of being unable to see. And that just sprang out of nowhere. It is very unsafe, but it has been all over YouTube. It has been on Twitter. There were really big influencers that were making videos of driving with blindfolds on. I know Jake Paul was one of those people who did it. There was a recent report where a girl got into an accident because she was driving while blindfolded. So it may seem really obvious to us that this is like a really unsafe challenge, but for the purpose of getting follows and views, or like, ooh, like, let's see if I can do this, that may seem more like a gray area.
And so I think the most important thing for parents to know about these things is just to educate themselves about what these things are. Make sure you're using reputable sources. I know there's a lot of good information about the Momo Challenge in particular on the Cyberbullying Research Center's website and on Shape the Sky's website. Shape the Sky is actually a licensed professional counselor who goes across the United States educating students, parents, and faculty members in schools about the various social medias, the various apps kids are using, making people more knowledgeable about promoting responsible smartphone users, because what's happening is our children and our teenagers, their brains aren't fully developed the way we as adults are. And so they don't necessarily understand, again, like you said, Josh, the difference between reality versus myth, and it seems real to them. Or like Emily said, it seems like, ooh, I could get more followers by doing this. And so parents need to know kind of what their kids are accessing, what their kids are seeing, what their kids know about these challenges. So even having the open conversation, you don't want to cause unnecessary panic if your child isn't aware of these challenges. Because I can say, you know, here at Juniata Valley, thankfully, I haven't had a lot of alarm from the students here, or a lot of conversation from the students here about those challenges. But it's really important, maybe even just to casually ask, like, are you seeing anything in what you're watching, what you're using, what you're posting? Are you seeing anything about these challenges or about unsafe behaviors? And if they do know about them, if they say, yeah, I've heard of the Momo Challenge, or I've heard of the Bird Box Challenge, then it opens the door for families to have conversations about good, safe practices and the fact that those things are false and that they aren't things that somebody should act on or try to do just to get likes and follows, or just because they think that that challenge is real and that they have to do it. So I think it's just really important to have open dialogue, exploring what they know, and then based on what they know, exploring safety practices. And then just in general, like you said, you can't keep them in a bubble and monitor everything, but keeping a general pulse on, like, what kinds of conversations are they having? What apps are they using? What websites are they looking at? So checking their search history every now and then, watching their social media a little bit, you know, not hovering, but closely enough that you know what kinds of things, you know, they're being exposed to.
Right. And actually, that's a really important thing that you had just mentioned, as far as being able to monitor some of the things they're doing, and why it's so important to have open lines of communication with your kid is there are apps like Snapchat, for example, that are designed, they're purpose-built to delete the content within a certain time range after it's sent. So, you know, there's really not the option to go back and like audit, hey, what has my kid been sharing, what photos are being sent, etc., because the app deletes them. So the only resource that you have is the conversation with kid, if they have that app, to get information as to what they're doing with it. So that it can be challenging, it can be really tough.
Okay. And Emily, in addition to Snapchat, do you want to comment on other apps that you know are really popular for our students today, even young elementary age children through high school?
Yeah, there are other photo related apps, not exactly like Snapchat, but Instagram is a big one that students are using now, where of course those photos stay up and they still have the ability to delete them when they want, but of course once you delete a picture, it's never actually gone once it's online. And Instagram does have a similar story pattern that Snapchat has, where for 24 hours you can post a picture to your quote-unquote story that everybody has access to and sees, that will eventually get deleted after 24 hours. So that's a similar aspect to what Snapchat does, except Snapchat is like instant. Like as soon as you see it, once you click away from the picture, it's gone, supposedly. Another popular app that is growing right now is called TikTok. I am a little bit older than this app has been out, so this is kind of a newer one for me, but from what I understand, you post videos, sometimes you lip sync to them, sometimes you just post something funny or stupid, but you do have a friends list on that app in which you can get into questionable conversations. Conversations can get deleted. You have no way to archive things that you are posting and that you are messaging to other people. So TikTok is not as, I wouldn't say dangerous, but like not as questionable as opposed to how Snapchat works, where like you cannot archive things, sure, but it is easier to access the videos that are being posted, if that makes sense. It's like halfway between Snapchat and Instagram, where you can, but you cannot see what all is going on. And then of course there's YouTube, which is easy to see. I think that's all I can think of right now.
I think Musical.ly, is that one too?
Musical.ly was actually adopted by TikTok.
Oh, okay.
So they combined.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think some of our students are still using like Facebook and Twitter, but they are less popular now. They're more of the older population's access, or if they do have those accounts, that's where they post safe things, sure, as compared to some of the things that they might try out or experiment posting on some of those other apps that Emily referenced. And I will say, going back to the Shape the Sky specifically, they have a wonderful Facebook page and a wonderful website with resources for parents about what apps are out there so that they can be more knowledgeable about them. And also just about, again, creating responsible users of social media, phones, and those types of things.
So I'd like to flip the script for a moment here, if I can, because I know that you guys certainly do a lot more in the district other than just talk about apps and deal with some of those situations. So I know that attendance is obviously a big part of your work. I was hoping maybe you could make some comments regarding that, especially as spring's coming around the corner here. A lot of children get the itis, and spring fever starts setting in. So any comments that you can give us about that?
Well, I think the most important thing that I want to emphasize about attendance is the famous quote of, "You can't teach an empty seat." So the more absences that a student has, the harder it's going to be for them to pick up the material, to learn what they need to learn, to get the full experience socially, emotionally, and academically, that the school setting offers. And just the importance of excuses. One of the biggest challenges I find with attendance is that excuses aren't always turned in, and a lot of parents and families don't realize that they don't only have to send them in with their kid. They can email them to Ms. Simpson. They can have them faxed to our high school fax number, and so there's other ways to get those excuses in if they suspect that maybe the absences are not being excused due to not turning in the excuses. The rule of thumb generally is that at 18 absences, a kid has missed 10% of the school year, and that's pretty significant to learning and development from what the research shows about attendance. So that is why a lot of parents get confused with the rule of 10 days and then you need a medical excuse, but really it's 10 days of any absence, whether that's an educational trip, whether it's a doctor's excuse, whether it's just a parent written excuse for those first 10 days. After they've reached 10 days, we're trying to prevent them from getting that chronic absenteeism point. And especially in the spring, a lot of times that's, absences have already accrued and then kids have trouble wanting to get here whenever it's time to, have the nice weather and the other activities that are more appealing. And so it just really is important to make sure that you use absences wisely, and make sure that you realize that once they reach 10, like, we don't have a choice. It's a state law under truancy that has to be a doctor's excuse once they reach 10 days, because they're trying to prevent kids from being chronically absent.
Sure. And then, and to piggyback off that, we also implemented the automated attendance alert system here at the school district too. So whenever our attendance officers officially mark the absence for the day, our Skylert system sends an alert to the parents just so that they're aware, making sure that they, especially as kids get older, they went to school and maybe detoured off. So we implemented that K through 12 just as a service to kind of assist our parents and guardians in making sure that they know that the absence is being recorded for that day.
And I really hope that that's going to be helpful, because as a parent myself, if I get that alert, that's also going to remind me about the excuse to send in the next day of like, oh yeah, okay, they're acknowledging my child's absent. I need to make sure that I send in that excuse with them or get that excuse to them somehow. So I think that it's going to be hopefully really helpful to the families in our district having that service in place, in addition to the safety aspect of it.
Sure. And then one last thing too, in my travels and in around this district as well, I've been seeing some little posters and things about Safe to Say. I was wondering if it would be possible to maybe just comment on what Safe to Say is, what that initiative's about, what they're trying to accomplish with it, anything you could give us about that.
Sure. So the Safe to Say program is a statewide initiative from the Office of the Attorney General in Pennsylvania. He worked very closely with the Sandy Hook Promise, which is a national initiative for Safe to Say programming. It is a completely anonymous tip line for reporting concerns that anyone has about a student. So what we did here in our district, every district in Pennsylvania had to train their students so that they were aware that this tip line is available as, one way to report concerns, ranging from tobacco and vaping to concerns about safety. It can be the sky's the limit. There's a whole list of options of what those concerns are. But when we trained our students, we really emphasized that it is a last resort because there are other options for reporting their concerns. We live in a small district. A lot of students do have a rapport with the teacher, another faculty member, that they can report a concern to them, and we're going to do everything we can to keep that confidential and private. We've also reminded them that our student assistance program is available, where they can fill out a one-page checkoff of what their concerns are about another friend or student. And then we contact families and get permission to look into that a little further, just to make sure that we don't need to address that and support that concern further. Another option we told them obviously is if it's imminent emergency and they're really worried that something could happen, is the local crisis line or 911 to get a student help that they need. And then finally, we said, if they really feel like they have to be 100% anonymous and they know that concern needs to get there, but they do not feel comfortable doing it any other way, then this Safe to Say program is an option for them to get their concerns shared and get that other student maybe the help that they need. And there is an app, there is a phone number, and there's a website. So there are 3 different ways that those concerns can be reported using that anonymous system if those other options don't work for a student.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Before we say goodbye, do you have any other final comments or final thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
The other thing about the Safe to Say Something program I think parents need to be aware of is once that tip is shared, it goes to a hotline of a team of people, regardless of which of the formats they use. It goes to a team of people who decide what to do about the concern. Sometimes it does come directly back to us as the school team. We have a team, and each school has their own team for it. So sometimes it comes back to us to handle, but sometimes when it's a case of a safety concern or something like that, they seek our guidance on the information they need to act on the tip, but they are the ones that make the decisions about the tips. And so I think it's really important for families to be aware of that if a tip is made about their child, we don't necessarily have a lot of control over what decision is made for what to do about that tip.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it very much. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Obviously, we felt like this information was really important. Wanted to have an opportunity to provide that to our parents. Again, don't forget to subscribe to Hornet TV if you're not already. If you hit our little notification bell on the bottom, you'll get notified as soon as we post any new videos, live streaming content, recorded content, etc. So with that, we're going to say goodbye. And again, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Absolutely.